Welcome to Easy Classic Stories. This is a retelling of A Christmas Carol, a novel by Charles Dickens. A Christmas Carol is a famous book by Charles Dickens. It's about a grumpy old man named Ebenezer Scrooge. He doesn't like Christmas, but one night ghosts visit him. They show him the past, present, and future. Scrooge learns to be kind and happy. This book is very successful. Many people love it. It has been turned into movies and plays. It's a heartwarming story about the joy of Christmas and being good to others. Now listen carefully to the story. At the end, we'll have an exercise on key events to help test your understanding. In the cold and foggy city of London, it was Christmas Eve. The streets were busy with people preparing for Christmas. But in one old building, there was a man who did not like Christmas at all. His name was Ebenezer Scrooge. Scrooge was a very rich man, but he was also very stingy. He never wanted to spend money on anything, not even to make his office warm in the cold winter. He worked in a small dark counting house where he counted his money all day. His employee, Bob Cratchit, worked in a tiny room next door. Bob was very poor, but he was always happy and kind. He had to work hard for Scrooge, who paid him very little money. On this Christmas Eve, Scrooge was in his counting house, working as usual. Bob was in his small room, trying to keep warm by a tiny fire. Suddenly, the door to Scrooge's office opened, and a young man came in. He was Scrooge's nephew, Fred. "Merry Christmas, Uncle," Fred said with a big smile. Scrooge looked up from his work and frowned. "Bah, humbug," he grumbled. Fred laughed and said, "Christmas a humbug, Uncle. You don't mean that. I know you're too smart to really believe that." Scrooge just grumbled again and went back to his work. Fred tried to invite Scrooge to a Christmas dinner, but Scrooge said no. He did not want to celebrate Christmas with anyone. After Fred left, two gentlemen came into Scrooge's office. They were collecting money to help the poor people who were cold and hungry. They asked Scrooge if he could give some money to help, but Scrooge said no. He thought the poor people should go to prison or workhouses, where they had to work hard for very little food. The gentlemen were shocked and left without saying anything more. Scrooge went back to his work, not caring about the poor people or Christmas. He only cared about his money. As the day ended, Scrooge left his office and walked home. He lived alone in a big old house. It was dark and cold, just like his office. He didn't like to spend money on making his home comfortable. He did not notice the happy people around him, preparing for Christmas. He only thought about his money and how he could make more. Little did he know that night would change his life forever. When he got home, he made himself a small dinner and went to bed early. His bedroom was dark and quiet. Suddenly, he heard a loud noise. It sounded like someone was dragging a heavy chain across the floor. Scrooge sat up in bed, his heart beating fast. He looked around the room but saw nothing. Then he heard the noise again. This time it was closer. Scrooge got out of bed and walked carefully towards the sound. As he opened his bedroom door, he saw something that made him gasp. There in the dim light stood a ghost. It was the ghost of his old business partner, Jacob Marley. Marley had died 7 years ago, but now he stood in front of Scrooge looking very sad. He was wrapped in a long, heavy chain that dragged on the floor. Scrooge stared at Marley, his eyes wide with fear. "What do you want with me?" Scrooge asked, his voice shaking. Marley looked at Scrooge with sad eyes. "I wear the chain I forged in life," Marley said. "I made it link by link and yard by yard. I girded it on of my own free will, and of my own free will I wore it." Scrooge didn't understand. He asked Marley why he was showing him this. Marley told Scrooge that he had come to warn him. He said that Scrooge was going to be visited by 3 spirits. These spirits would show Scrooge the error of his ways. "You will be haunted," Marley said, "by 3 spirits." Scrooge was very scared. He asked Marley if he could avoid these visits, but Marley said no. Scrooge had to see these spirits and learn from them. Marley then disappeared, leaving Scrooge alone in the dark. Scrooge went back to bed, but he couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about Marley's words and the heavy chain. He wondered what the 3 spirits would show him. Little did he know, his journey was about to begin. Scrooge lay in his bed, waiting nervously for the first spirit. As the clock struck 1, a bright light filled the room. Suddenly a figure appeared before him. It was the ghost of Christmas past. The spirit looked like a child, but also like an old man. It had a gentle, kind face. "Are you the spirit whose coming was foretold to me?" Scrooge asked, his voice trembling. The spirit nodded and reached out its hand. "Come with me," it said softly. Scrooge took the spirit's hand and suddenly they were flying through the air. They travelled back in time to a place from Scrooge's past. They landed in a small town where Scrooge saw a young boy sitting alone in a classroom. The boy looked sad and lonely. Scrooge recognized the boy as himself. "Why do you show me this?" Scrooge asked the spirit. "I don't want to see it." But the spirit said nothing and pointed to the scene. Scrooge watched as his younger self sat alone, waiting for his friends to come back from their Christmas holidays. He remembered how lonely he had felt, left behind while everyone else celebrated with their families. Next, the spirit took Scrooge to another scene from his past. They were in a bustling warehouse, where a jolly man named Mr. Fezziwig was throwing a Christmas party for his employees. Scrooge saw himself as a young apprentice, dancing and laughing with the others. He remembered how happy he had been working for kind Mr. Fezziwig. "Why did I ever leave this place?" Scrooge wondered aloud. The spirit then took Scrooge to a more painful memory. They were in a cozy home, where a young woman named Belle was crying. Scrooge watched as his younger self broke off his engagement to Belle. He remembered how he had chosen money over love, and how it had broken Belle's heart. "Leave me! Take me back! Haunt me no longer!" Scrooge cried, unable to bear the sight. But the spirit had one more scene to show him. They were in a small, modest home, where Belle lived with her husband and children. Scrooge saw how happy and content Belle was, surrounded by her loving family. He realized what he had given up for his greed. "Spirit, show me no more," Scrooge begged. "I cannot bear it." The spirit looked at Scrooge with kindness and said, "Remember the lessons of the past." With that, the ghost of Christmas past disappeared, leaving Scrooge alone in his bedroom. He sat on his bed, his heart heavy with the memories of his past. He knew he had made mistakes, but he also knew it was not too late to change. As he waited for the next spirit, he hoped for a chance to make things right. Scrooge waited in his bed, thinking about the lessons he had learned from the ghost of Christmas past. As the clock struck 2, a bright light filled the room again. This time, a giant figure appeared before him. It was the ghost of Christmas present, a jolly spirit with a big belly and a crown of holly on his head. "Are you the spirit of Christmas present?" Scrooge asked. The spirit laughed and said, "I am. Come with me and see what Christmas means to others." Scrooge took the spirit's hand and they flew through the air once more. They landed in a small, cozy home. Scrooge recognized it as Bob Cratchit's house. Inside, Bob's family was preparing for Christmas dinner. Mrs. Cratchit and the children were busy cooking and setting the table. Despite their poverty, they were happy and excited. Scrooge watched as Bob came home carrying his youngest son, Tiny Tim, on his shoulders. Tiny Tim was a small, weak boy who walked with a crutch, but he had a big smile and a kind heart. The family sat down to eat, and Bob said a prayer, thanking God for their blessings. "God bless us, everyone," Tiny Tim said, his little voice filled with joy. Scrooge felt a lump in his throat as he watched the Cratchit family enjoy their simple meal. He saw the love and happiness they shared, even though they had so little. He began to understand the true meaning of Christmas. Next, the spirit took Scrooge to his nephew Fred's house. Fred was hosting a Christmas party, and his friends and family were laughing and playing games. Scrooge watched as they talked about him, wondering why he hated Christmas so much. Fred defended his uncle, saying he believed there was still good in him. Scrooge felt ashamed as he listened to their words. He realized how his actions had affected others and how he had pushed people away with his bitterness. The spirit then showed Scrooge something shocking. He pulled back his robe to reveal 2 small, miserable children. They were called Ignorance and Want. The spirit warned Scrooge that these were the shadows of what could be if people did not care for each other. "Have they no refuge or resource?" Scrooge asked, looking at the pitiful figures. The spirit quoted Scrooge's own words back to him. "Are there no prisons? Are there no workhouses?" Scrooge felt a deep sadness as he realized the consequences of his actions. He knew he had to change. As the spirit disappeared, Scrooge was left alone in his bedroom, waiting for the final spirit. He hoped that he still had time to make things right and bring happiness to those around him. Scrooge waited in his bed, his heart heavy with the lessons he had learned. As the clock struck 3, a dark figure appeared before him. It was the ghost of Christmas yet to come, a silent and frightening spirit. It wore a black robe that hid its face and body. Scrooge felt a chill run down his spine. "Are you the spirit of Christmas yet to come?" Scrooge asked, his voice shaking. The spirit said nothing but pointed its bony finger towards the window. Scrooge understood that he was to follow. They flew through the air and landed in a busy part of the city. People were talking about a man who had died. Scrooge listened as they discussed the man's wealth and how no one cared for him. He realized they were talking about him. Next, the spirit took Scrooge to a dark and lonely place. There, Scrooge saw his own body lying on a bed, lifeless. He felt a deep sadness as he realized that no one mourned his death. He had lived his life alone, and he would die alone. The spirit then took Scrooge to the Cratchit family's home, but this time there was no happiness or joy. The family was mourning the loss of Tiny Tim. Scrooge watched as Bob and his wife cried, remembering their beloved son. He felt a deep regret for not helping them when he had the chance. Scrooge begged the spirit to show him someone who felt sorry for his death. The spirit took him to a quiet place where a couple was talking. They mentioned Scrooge's death but felt no sadness. Instead, they were glad to be rid of him. Finally, the spirit took Scrooge to a graveyard. There Scrooge saw his own grave, cold and unvisited. The sight filled him with fear and regret. He realized that his life had been wasted, and he had missed the chance to do good. "Spirit, I promise to change," Scrooge cried out. "I will honor Christmas in my heart and try to keep it all the year. I will live in the past, the present, and the future. The spirits of all three shall strive within me. I will not shut out the lessons that they teach." With that, the spirit disappeared, and Scrooge found himself back in his bedroom. He was filled with a new determination to change his ways and bring happiness to those around him. He knew he had one last chance to make things right. Scrooge woke up in his bed, his heart pounding with excitement. He looked out the window and saw that it was Christmas morning. He felt like a new man, full of joy and gratitude. He laughed and cried, promising to change his ways. "I will honor Christmas in my heart and try to keep it all the year," Scrooge said to himself. He quickly got dressed and went out into the city. He saw a boy on the street and asked him to buy the biggest turkey from the poulterer's shop. Scrooge wanted to send it to the Cratchit family anonymously. The boy ran off to do as he was told. Next, Scrooge went to his nephew Fred's house. He knocked on the door, and when Fred opened it, Scrooge said, "Merry Christmas, nephew! I have come to dinner. Will you have me?" Fred was surprised, but happy to see his uncle. He welcomed Scrooge into his home, and they celebrated Christmas together. Scrooge laughed and played games with Fred's friends, feeling happier than he had in years. The next day, Scrooge went to work early. When Bob Cratchit arrived, Scrooge called him into his office. Bob was nervous, but Scrooge smiled and said, "Bob, I'm going to raise your salary." Bob was shocked and grateful. Scrooge promised to help the Cratchit family and be a kinder, more generous person. He became a beloved figure in the community, always ready to help those in need. From that day on, Scrooge kept his promise. He honored Christmas in his heart and tried to keep it all the year. He was no longer a miserly old man, but a friend to all. And so, Ebenezer Scrooge found redemption and happiness, thanks to the spirits of Christmas. Great job sticking with the story all the way to the end. It's time to review the key ideas with a fun multiple-choice quiz. You'll find the answers in the comments section. Take your time with the questions, and don't forget to leave a comment below to let us know if you enjoyed the story. Your feedback helps us improve. If you liked it, show your support by hitting the like button. It really makes our day. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories. Thank you so much for being with us.